Hi, welcome to the second tutorial in our series. This is on TURF, our usability framework. Again, when we're talking about what usability means, there are a number of different definitions out there. You can look at the ISO standards, you can look at usability.gov, you can find a variety of different frameworks that have essentially captured the same sort of notion about how usable and satisfying a system is by looking at things like efficiency or subjective impressions of system use. Dr. Jiajie Zhang and Mohammed Walji have created a framework for usability called TURF. And this is the definition of usability from a TURF perspective. It includes how useful, usable, and satisfying a system is for the intended users to accomplish goals in a work domain by performing certain sequences of tasks. And let me break this down a little bit more for you. The TURF framework for EHR usability separates things out into the intrinsic complexity of a work environment and the extrinsic difficulty of a system or interface that might be working within that environment. This separation of intrinsic complexity of the work and the extrinsic difficulty that might be imposed by the system allows you to separate out the difficulty of the complex nature of healthcare as well as the difficulty created by systems like EHRs and other types of IT. Additionally, the TURF framework, which is actually an acronym for Tasks, Users, Representations, and Functions, split out the components of work into the goals or functions that you're trying to accomplish, the users or roles that perform those functions, the representations or the interfaces that people have to deal with, as well as the tasks or the series of activities that have to be performed within those representations to achieve those functions by those users. Each one of these components of T, U, R, and F then split out to different components of the definition of usability. Whether or not functions accomplish their goals is how useful the work or the system is. How satisfying the system is a function of the completion of those goals by those users using that system, which they find satisfying. And the usableness, which is the additional component of this definition, has to do with how well the tasks are supported by the representations that they're embedded in. All of this taken together is the TURF framework. So as you can see, intrinsic complexity, or the complications or complex nature of healthcare work. So for example, emergency care or intensive care. It's very complex work with large teams, lots of body systems involved. It's highly complex, requires lots of temporal, non-deterministic factors. All of this goes together to complete the functions of caring for a patient, managing the hospital, managing multiple patients, those sorts of things. If the system that you're developing, the HIT system, accomplishes those functions in that complex environment and succeeds, then the system is deemed useful. The extrinsic difficulty are the representations and the tasks that the system requires of those users in that complex environment. Systems that work well are usable, and systems that fail, either due to having tasks that have many, many steps, so that high click count that people complain about, or representations that are poor and require a high degree of learning to understand what's on the system, would be therefore less usable systems. So the TURF framework is a framework for understanding usability, and it can be used both to evaluate a system as well as to help guide the design of systems. So when you're evaluating a system, you might go in and determine how useful the system is through a function analysis to see from what has been stated as the goals or the needs of this environment, how many of those functions does the system accomplish. You might also, on the flip side, design a system to make sure that it meets all those functions and is therefore intrinsically useful. Similarly, when you're doing user testing, as we'll talk about at the end, you will need to make sure that you test all the users who engage in those goals or the tasks necessary to complete those goals to get their impression of how the system worked for them. Was it difficult to manage? Did they get easier over time? Do they like the look and feel of it? Those would all fall under the satisfying component, and the satisfaction is typically measured using a standard usability scale or a SUS. The usableness of the system in terms of the representations and the tasks have to do with the efficiencies and memory demand, and those can be, again, measured through effectiveness and efficiency measures like time on task, number of errors, path deviations, those kinds of things. We'll talk about that more as we move into user testing. The TURF framework, along with these tutorials and other products that are available on our SHARP-C website, are all part of a government initiative funded by the Office of the National Coordinator. The SHARP-C project, housed at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, was intended to create products that help the cognitive support of patient-centered healthcare use. Some of these products include things like the TURF framework that you've just seen, as well as a TURF software tool, which I'll mention a little bit later. The TURF software tool is a comprehensive tool suite for assessing usability. Additionally, SHARP-C projects include the SIFSA framework about flexibility, a product called TwinList, which is used for medication reconciliation, a product called Priority Contact, which is built on the modeling application for healthcare, CIRSE, a tool for supporting clinicians as they recognize and diagnose SIRS, or Systemic Inflammatory Response Syndrome, as well as underlying algorithms for clinical decision support rules, automatic clinical summarization, and a host of EHR usability style guidelines, which I'll mention more as we talk about heuristic evaluation. All of these products and information regarding these products can be found on the sharpc.org website. Additionally, the output of the SHARP-C project can be found in a book called Better EHR, Usability, Workflow, and Cognitive Support in Electronic Health Records. The Better EHR book will be available through the Apple iTunes bookstore, as well as off our SHARP-C website. Please check our website for additional information.